underscore UI is basically what's called a decorator. A decorator is a kind of dynamic coding way in which Python allows you to modify and or apply code after it compiles and runs. I won't explain the whole details of that. It's a bit confusing perhaps, but it's a way for us, think of it as a way to access methods across different classes or modules. So register underscore UI is actually a method. This method exists here. You can see it referenced. So frame.hello, and then we're getting register UI. So I'm basically giving an input called window. So if we go to frame.hello, so frame package, and then hello Python, we can see there's the register underscore UI method. And it does take a single input called UI underscore name. So what it's doing is taking a string and then adding it to this decorator sort of list here, UIS, so different kinds of basically user interfaces. And that becomes user interfaces that we just did, so the window, the console, and also the voice. And all these things will be compiled and then be used. So it's kind of, think of it as a way, as a dynamic way to sort of create some commonality between different modules. So if speech is another one. So if we have window that has this UI method, and then we reference it, or we register underscore UI references window, it allows us then to access this particular module within the hello module that'll actually be called. So recall that in the main method or in the main module, hello is actually called. It will then call this register underscore UI. Because register underscore UI exists also as a decorator in window, that means window will then automatically be called, and so these things will be utilized. So think of a code that will be then called dynamically as other methods are being called because of this tag, this decorator tag that you see referenced here. So that's all it does, is basically allows us to dynamically apply code as the particular program is running. So it's a very nifty way of applying code without actually necessarily calling it. And this is also true with speech. So you can see speech is also registered as a UI, and that's why we have to call it speech as the input, just like we have to call window as our input as well. So all these sort of decorators reference the specific inputs that we have to give when we did the run, if you recall, in Jython. So that's the specific input that we used in the arguments. So speech does these things, and it's a bunch of other Java-related things, and that's where it says my name is Hal, if you remember, and do you want to go on a spaceship with me, was the other part of the speech. So it does all these things, and console is another simple one. The console is the most simple. It just prints the message. So even though it's using this sort of print call, it's very kind of a simple way of doing something. It's actually basically within Python, it's just printing something. But again, utilizing some of the Jython libraries, and thus it is technically using Java, since we're going through Jython to actually launch this print message. But it shows you a good, nice example of how to do that. And yeah, so you have three ways in which we're applying, and they're all found in this frame class. So hello is the main class where you're going to actually be using, or it's called from the main. Once you've parsed up your input, it's going to be called from the main. So it will go to this part of your code where at this point your decorators will be inputted, and then you'll actually have this language, this method in greet going through it, and then you'll have the message being called the message method, and that's the message method over there. And you can see here it's going to go through the UIs, the user interfaces, and that's because the UIs all were essentially dynamically created in this case using that particular method, which then references the specific modules. So we've used all these modules without actually calling them. We only have a few calls in this particular program. So it is a bit tricky this week in terms of figuring out what's actually happening. But that's why you have all this extra code functionality happening. It allows you, decorators allows us to basically utilize classes as well as modules and other kinds of functionality within Python across different code that we create without necessarily specifically calling them. So we call it through these decorators. Decorators allows us to call methods by referencing a common kind of key term or phrase or method in this case. So register UI is a common method. We give it a common an input that distinguishes that specific module in this case, and so each module will then be called when hello is called, because they all have this decorator within them, and they're all referencing this method that will be called. Okay, so that's how it generally works in this, and that's something you can sort of determine as you debug the specific our specific Hello World application for this week. So that's pretty much it, and we'll go over through some of these other issues in class in terms of how you go create, or the sort of philosophy actually behind polyglot programming, as well as we'll talk about multi-paradigm programming this week.